Okay, hi everybody. I'm going to show you how to make a additive color wheel in Photoshop. So this will help us in two primary ways for our objectives, and that is to understand the native language of color channels in Photoshop, which will eventually help us in color optimization. So the goal is to have a deeper understanding of the primary and secondary colors and how they work. So I'm going to start out by looking at the channels. So when you open Photoshop or an image in Photoshop, your setup should look something like this. If you go down over by layers and then look over and see the menu for channels and select it. And you'll see that I have these channels. They're called red, green, and blue, which are the primary colors in additive color, but they appear as a grayscale. So this is actually a grayscale from 0 to 255, from absolute white pixel to an absolute black pixel with 254 steps in between. And the red channel has a red filter over it, the green channel has a green filter over it, and the blue channel has a blue filter over it. And we don't see those filters because they're not necessary natively, but we can go into Photoshop and go into Preferences, into Interface, and turn on Show Channels in Color. And then we are able to see what we're doing a little bit. This is a lovely early nebula image. And so here is how the computer sees this image or how it processes this image. And so you can see 3 channels of 256 levels of value are compressed or layered on top of each other in these 3 8-bit channels in order to create all the colors and the spectrum that we see on our computer screens. And just to show you something similar in a portrait or something more recognizable, I'm going to go back for a second to the interface so we can see it in black and white. So you can see how never mind the side by side, but the red channel and the green channel appear different. So you see the red channel, there's a little more contrast in his face. It's a little less contrast in the overall image. And you see in the blue channel, there's not a lot of information. The blue channel, because the blue is dark and it doesn't always know where to put those values, that it might end up being noisier or appear like a lower resolution. But when the 3 channels are put together, we get the full color spectrum. Okay, so we're going to make our own color wheel, and I'm going to put the color channels back and create a new file. Just File and New. And mostly the default is fine. Any square image will do. 1,000 by 1,000 pixels is good. The resolution doesn't matter. RGB color matters. The default is 8-bit, and it should be white. It might not be white. So just change it to white if it's not. And I'm going to say OK. And then I have this super basic plain image with 3 channels. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my circle. If the square is the default, just click on this little menu triangle at the bottom. It'll bring up more tools and grab an elliptic. And I'm going to hold down my Shift key and I'll be able to create a perfect circle. So I want it to be kind of no bigger than 1/3 of the space. And I'm going to go into my red channel and I want to delete this or make it a black and white image, or in this case a black and red image. So to make sure I have black in my foreground, I'm going to click this default here, and if black is the background, I'll just toggle it there. And then I hold I hold Option and I hit Delete. And I can see in my little preview that I've created something. Now I'm just going to click and drag that image over here and go into the green channel and do the exact same thing. And I might make them overlap more. I think that will look better. And hold down Option and just hit delete. And then I will grab that again. And again, I want them to all overlap. And I can't see my red channel, but I'm sort of trusting from my memory that that's about right. And I go into my blue channel and hit Option Delete. And I can see through my preview that something pretty close to a primary color wheel has emerged. And so you can see that this is actually not an RGB in the primary color section, but it's cyan, magenta, and yellow. And the secondaries are red, green, and blue. And so it's just how we set this up. It's actually an inverse of an RGB color wheel. So I can go into my menu and select inverse, or I can simply press Command I, and now I have a perfect RGB additive color wheel, which means the more we add, the more light it becomes. So when we mix red, green, and blue, 100% of red, 100% of green, 100% of blue, we actually get white. When we add 50% of green, 50% of red, we get a primary, or in this case, a secondary yellow. So we're working in additive color. So this is no longer when you're working with pigments, which is subtractive. So if I inverse it again, this is closer to the color wheel you're familiar with. It's more like a printer's color wheels, CMYK. But that's ink, adding ink on paper, or mixing pigments. If you're used to paint and you're used to red, yellow, and blue, this is very close to that, but not the same thing. So this is what we work with, and kind of your job now is to memorize sort of the color complements. Red is the complement of cyan, green is the complement of magenta, and blue is the complement of yellow. Write that down, do whatever to drill that in, because when we start doing color optimizing, you'll need that. And that's it for this.